Winterfell learned a new rhythm: repair, bury, ration, watch. The yard filled with wagons by daylight, their wheels crusted with ice, their axles groaning under weight that mattered more than gold. Sacks of grain were stacked beneath canvas that snapped in the wind. Barrels of salt meat were lashed down with rope thick enough to hold a man. Crates of spearheads and arrow bundles sat like teeth waiting for mouths. Even the smell was different now. Less smoke, more provisions, more sweat from honest labor instead of panic. Robb Stark walked along the line of wagons and ran his gloved hand over the canvas once, as if making certain it was real. Food, steel, warmth in the form of wool blankets rolled tight and bound with twine. Gifts in another world. Here they were weapons. Catelyn Stark stood a little behind him, her cloak pulled close, her eyes moving constantly. Over the wagons, over the men, over the tower shadows that had once hidden Ramsay's archers. She could not stop seeing cages when she looked at iron. She could not stop hearing chains when she heard rope. Daisy Mormont barked orders like a woman born for cold decisions. Ox teams on the first 3, she snapped. Horses on the lighter carts. Keep the spears covered, ice bites metal. And no one drinks until the gates are behind us. Maege Mormont stalked through the yard in bearskin, looking as if she had stepped out of an older north where men still feared forests more than kings. She paused by a crate of spearheads and nodded once, satisfied. "The wall needs more than prayers," she said, voice rough. "Good." Galbart Glover inspected the riders chosen to escort the convoy. Men with faces like stone, their breath a steady fog. They were not the loudest. They were the ones who didn't blink at cold or fear. He tightened a strap on one man's saddle himself, then looked up as Robb approached. "You're sending enough," Galbart Glover said. It was not a compliment. It was a question shaped like one. "I'm sending what I can without starving Winterfell," Robb Stark replied. His voice was calm, but his eyes were dark with the weight of it. "If the wall falls, this grain won't matter anyway." Catelyn Stark's throat tightened. She hated how true that sounded. A night's watchman stood near the wagons, black cloak patched, face windburned, eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights. He had arrived in the dark and looked as if he had never fully stepped out of it. He bowed stiffly when Robb looked his way. "Your Grace," the watchman said, "Castle Black will remember." Robb Stark's mouth tightened. "Castle Black doesn't need memory," he said. "It needs men who can hold a line." The watchman's gaze flicked to Grey Wind, who paced near the gate, nails clicking on stone, ears forward as if listening for a sound only wolves could hear. "We have men," the watchman said, voice hoarse. "But not enough who believe." Robb Stark's eyes narrowed. "They will," he said quietly. "When the dead walk, belief stops being optional." He turned back to the wagons. "Maege Mormont," Robb said, and Maege's head snapped up, attentive. "You take command of the convoy to the wall. Galbart Glover, you ride with her. I want you both there. The watch must see northern banners with their own eyes." Maege Mormont's grin was brief and feral. She said, "I've always wanted to see the wall again when it isn't a story." Galbart Glover nodded once. "We'll get it there," he promised, and Robb believed him because Galbart did not promise what he couldn't deliver. Daisy Mormont stepped closer, eyes sharp. "And Winterfell?" she asked quietly. Robb Stark looked at her. "You hold it," he said. "You hold it like it's the only hearth left." Daisy's jaw tightened. "I will." Catelyn Stark watched her son hand pieces of his world to other hands and felt the old fear of letting go, fear of losing control. But control had nearly killed them at the Twins. Perhaps this was what kingship was, trusting others to carry weight, even when your bones screamed to carry it yourself. Robb Stark raised his voice just enough for men near the wagons to hear. "No detours," he ordered. "No stopping at holdfasts for comfort. If wolves howl in the trees, you keep moving. If men beg for grain, you mark their names and you send word back. The wall gets fed first. The wall gets steel first." A few men nodded grimly. gray wind stopped pacing and stared north, rigid and intent. Robb followed the wolf's gaze, and for a heartbeat he felt the north's vastness pressing down. Forest and snow and old things in the dark. Then he turned back to the living. "Open the gates," Robb Stark said, and Winterfell sent its first lifeline north, into a cold that did not care whether men believed or not. The road north was a wound cut through Wight. Maege Mormont rode at the head of the column with her reins held tight and her gaze held tighter. Galbart Glover kept pace beside her. His cloak pulled high against wind that stung like thrown needles. Behind them the wagons creaked, oxen straining, nostrils flaring, hoofs slipping on hidden ice. Men walked alongside with hands on wheel spokes when the drifts grew too deep, pushing, grunting, breath steaming in harsh bursts. Night's Watch scouts guided them with the practiced caution of men who had learned that the north had teeth even before corpses started moving. They avoided open fields where sound carried. They avoided narrow passes where ambush could sit like a stone in a sling. They moved through stands of trees where pine shadows broke the wind, and when they had to camp, they did so in hollows with fires dug low and hidden under canvas. The wolves followed sometimes, not gray wind. He was far behind in Winterfell, a shadow at Robb Stark's heel. These were smaller wolves, wild, watching from ridgelines with eyes like pale coins. They never came close enough to be threatened, but they never left either. Maege Mormont took it as a sign and refused to decide whether it was good. On the third day, they passed a holdfast with its gates shut and its walls lined with frightened faces. A man shouted down from the parapet, voice cracking with hunger. "Grain," he begged. "For the love of the old gods, we have children." Maege Mormont looked up at him, her mouth hard. "So do we," she called back. "So does the wall." She pointed north with a gloved hand. "If the wall falls, your children die anyway. Open your gates for riders from Winterfell. There will be lists. There will be aid when we can spare it. Not now." The holdfast man sagged, despair carving him hollow. Maege felt no triumph in refusing. Only the cold understanding that mercy without strategy was murder by accident. At dusk, as the sky bled red behind snow clouds, Galbart Glover rode back along the column, checking ropes and canvas, checking the men's faces. One of the younger riders, a tall hard boy, barely grown, asked in a trembling voice, "My lord, do you truly think the dead walk?" Galbart Glover did not scoff. He did not comfort. He only answered honestly. "I think the Watch is afraid," he said. "And I've never seen the Watch afraid of anything they could stab." The boy swallowed hard and pulled his cloak tighter. That night they camped in a grove where the trees grew close and the snow lay softer. A Watch scout returned late, face pale, eyes too wide. He spoke low to Maege, and Maege's hand tightened on her spear. "Tracks," the scout whispered. "Not wolves, not deer, too many feet. No drag marks, no camp, just lines, like men walking in a column." Galbart Glover's eyes narrowed. "Wildlings," the scout shook his head. "No," he whispered. "Too steady, too quiet." Maege Mormont looked into the trees where darkness sat between trunks and felt the Old North's fear stir. Fear of things that did not fear you back. "Double watch," Maege ordered. "No one sleeps alone. And if you see something that should be dead, burn it." The men nodded, faces tight. In the distance, wolves howled, and the sound rolled through trees like a warning carried by blood memory. The convoy moved at first light again, wheels groaning, oxen straining, breath steaming, pushing north toward a wall that might soon need more than food. Castle Black greeted them with wind that tried to peel skin from bone. The wall rose above the yard like a frozen sky fallen to earth, its face slick with ice, its bulk so immense it made men feel like ants crawling beneath a god's heel. Snow blew in hard sheets, obscuring the world beyond the gate, and the cold had a different bite here, older, deeper, as if the air itself carried memory of things that had died and refused to stay dead. When the convoy's first wagons creaked into the courtyard, Night's Watch brothers stared as if the sight was a miracle. Food, beers, blankets, Real help from the south that was not a rumor. For a moment, even fear loosened its grip. A man stepped forward to meet them, black cloak snapping in wind. His hair was dark and rimed with ice. His eyes were gray and steady, the eyes of a man who had learned that leadership was less about authority and more about walking into cold places first. Jon Snow. Maege Mormont dismounted and bowed her head. Not deeply, northern respect, not southern ceremony. Jon Snow, she said. We brought what we could. Jon Snow's gaze flicked over the wagons, the oxen, the men, and something like relief tightened his mouth. You came, he said quietly, as if the simple fact of it mattered more than any speech. Galbart Glover stepped down, stamping snow from his boots. Robb Stark sends food and steel, he said, and he asks you to speak plain. How bad is it? Jon Snow's jaw tightened. Bad enough that men whisper prayers in the dark, he said. He nodded toward the yard's far edge where a pyre smoldered, its ash black against white. We burned 3 corpses yesterday. 2 tried to rise before the fire took them. Maege Mormont's eyes hardened. And the men beyond the wall? She asked. Jon Snow's gaze lifted toward the gate and the white void beyond. We don't see them, he said. That's what scares me. We hear things. Scraping. Thuds. Like someone testing wood. His voice lowered. The woods are too quiet. Ravens go missing.
Galbart Glaver exhaled slowly. Bresso Hirschfolk.
You want men, he said. Jon Snow nodded once. I want men who can hold a line, he said. And men who believe fire is not only for warmth. Maege Mormont gestured back toward the wagons. Take it, she said. All of it. Count it. Ration it. And send riders south with lists. Winterfell will try again. But we can't promise more than the north can spare. Jon Snow's eyes flicked to the direwolf seal stamped on one crate. Robb Stark believes you, he murmured. He does, Galbart Glover said, and there was pride in his voice. He doesn't have the luxury of not believing. Jon Snow's mouth tightened as if the name Robb carried weight he could not fully speak. Neither do we, he said. A shout rose from the wall walk. Movement! A ranger called, voice raw. Every head snapped toward the gate. Men's hands went to swords. Torches were grabbed. For a heartbeat, even the wagons seemed to freeze, oxen snorting nervously. Jon Snow's posture changed, stillness sharpening into readiness. To the gate, he ordered. Maege Mormont drew her spear. Galbart Glover's hand went to his sword. They moved through swirling snow toward the massive wooden gate reinforced with iron bands. Beyond it, nothing could be seen but white, and yet something was there. Something that made the wood tremble faintly, as if pressed from the other side by a weight that did not breathe. Jon Snow lifted a torch and held it higher, flame whipping in the wind. Hold, he said, voice steady. No one opens until I say. The Watch brothers formed a line, shields up, spears braced. Maege Mormont's men joined them without question, northern steel beside black cloaks. The wood shuddered again. Then silence, too sudden, too complete, fell on the gate, like a predator stepping back into shadow to watch its prey flinch. Jon Snow's eyes narrowed. They're learning, he whispered. Maege Mormont's grip tightened. So are we, she replied. The first real fight came that same night, because the dead did not care about arrival ceremonies. The blizzard eased for an hour, the snow thinning enough that the world beyond the gate became shapes instead of pure white. Jon Snow took it as warning, not mercy. Clearer sight meant the enemy wanted to be seen. They opened the gate only a crack, enough to push a line of men through, enough to keep retreat possible. Rangers moved first, black cloaks snapping, torches held high. Maege Mormont's men followed, spears braced, faces grim. Galbart Glover stood near the hinge side with archers ready to fire into whatever emerged. The cold beyond the wall's shadow was different, raw, biting, wrong. Felt like the air itself was watching. Then the shapes appeared. At first they looked like men stumbling through snow, bent against wind. Then torchlight caught faces that were too pale, eyes that were too bright. Blue. not the gray of living eyes under moonlight. Blue like ice seen from within. Mouths hung open, breathless, and yet they moved. Wights, a Night's Watch brother whimpered, a sound he tried to swallow. Jon Snow's voice cut through like steel. "Hold," he ordered. Spears, fire, torches were thrust forward. The first Wight reached for a living man with stiff fingers. Maege Mormont drove her spear through its chest. The Wight did not scream. It simply kept coming, hands clawing, until a torch was jammed into its ribs and flame caught on dry cloth. Fire changed everything. The Wight shrieked then, a sound like air forced through frozen lungs, and staggered back, flailing, as flame crawled up its sleeves. It fell into snow and kept moving, crawling, until a ranger buried an axe into its skull and held the torch there until the head burned. More came, out of the Wight like a tide that did not tire. They moved in clumps, then lines, then a mass, as if something behind them pushed with silent will. Jon Snow fought at the front, sword flashing, torchlight dancing on steel. He cut an arm off a Wight and the arm kept writhing in the snow like a severed serpent. He drove his blade into a throat and felt nothing but frozen resistance. He shouted for fire again, always fire, as if the word itself was a charm. Maege Mormont's spear snapped when a Wight grabbed it and wrenched with unnatural strength. Maege cursed, let the shaft go, and pulled an axe from her belt, swinging it into a Wight's face hard enough to crack bone that did not bleed. Galbart Glover's archers loosed arrows tipped with cloth soaked in oil. Flaming shafts arced into the Wight and struck bodies that did not flinch until fire took them. The smell was awful. Burning hair, burning cloth, burning something that was neither fully dead nor fully alive. A Wight lunged at Jon Snow, its mouth opening impossibly wide. Jon ducked, drove his sword up through its jaw, and shoved, forcing it back. The Wight clung to the blade with both hands, nails tearing, and Jon had to kick it away, boot connecting with ribs that felt like frozen wood. "Back!" Jon Snow shouted. "Back to the gate!" They retreated in disciplined steps, not running because running meant falling, and falling meant hands on your throat. Maege Mormont's men held formation, torches thrust forward like a wall of light. The Wights surged, hungry, fearless. At the gate, Watch brothers hauled the chains, widening the opening. Men stumbled through, dragging wounded, shoving burning Wights away with spears. One Wight reached the threshold, hands clawing at the wood. A brother slammed a torch into its face. The Wight shrieked and fell back into snow, aflame. Then the gate slammed shut with a thunderous boom that reverberated through Castle Black's yard. Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of torches, the ragged breathing of men who realized they were still alive. Jon Snow leaned on his sword for a heartbeat, chest heaving, eyes fixed on the gate as if expecting it to splinter. Maege Mormont's face was smeared with soot and frost, her eyes bright. "They were testing," Jon Snow said hoarsely. Maege Mormont nodded once. "Then send word south," she replied. "Tell them the dead don't test forever. They come." Sansa Stark's letter arrived wrapped in a lie. The lion seal was not on the outside, too obvious, too insulting. The letter came with a merchant's mark, a bland bit of wax that pretended it was nothing but trade news. But Winterfell's maester knew better. He had seen too many seals change hands. Robb Stark broke it at the dais in the Great Hall because he refused to let it become a private weakness. Too much of his life had been decided in private corners, behind tapestries, beneath music, under roofs that promised safety. If Sansa's words were a weapon, he would look at the blade with witnesses around him. Catelyn Stark stood close, hands clenched, her face pale as snow outside. Barbary Dustin watched from a pillar with that cold gleam she wore when pain was near. Daisy Mormont leaned against the table, arms crossed, eyes sharp. The great Jon Umber paced, snarling quietly under his breath like a storm that had learned patience only because it had to. Robb unfolded the parchment. The first lines were what Tywin Lannister wanted. Condemnation wrapped in religious language, the faith's words pressed into his sister's hand like a knife. Robb's jaw tightened. He read the accusations without flinching, but Catelyn saw the pain anyway. The way his fingers tightened, the way his shoulders went rigid. Then Robb's eyes moved farther down, and something changed. He slowed. He read again, and then he read a third time, his gaze narrowing, as if he had found a hairline crack in stone where a door could be pried open. Catelyn leaned in, voice trembling. "What does she say?" she whispered. Robb's voice came low. "She says what they told her to say," he answered, and the words tasted bitter. "And she says what she wants me to hear." He lifted the letter slightly, letting others see the lines. "Watch your friends. Watch your doors. Watch your songs." Robb murmured, and his eyes flicked up, meeting Daisy's gaze, then the Greyjohn's, then Barbrey's. She hid it. She hid it in plain ink. Barbrey Dustin's mouth curved, not quite a smile. "Smart girl," she said softly. "Lions don't notice what they think they already own."
Catelyn Stark es breath hitched.
She pressed her hand to her mouth, eyes shining. "She's alive," she whispered, as if saying it aloud could keep it true. Robb's gaze hardened. "Alive," he said, "and still being used." The great Jon Umber slammed his fist into a table, wood cracking. "Then we go," he roared. "We ride south and burn King's Landing." "No," Robb Stark snapped, and the word cracked like a whip. The hall fell silent. Grey Wind lifted his head, ears pricked at the shift in tone. Robb stared at the letter, then folded it slowly, carefully, as if folding a piece of his own heart without breaking it. "That's what they want," he said quietly. "They want me running south with a sword in my hand and grief in my eyes. They want Winterfell empty again. They want the wall ignored." His gaze lifted, ice-hard. "They don't get it." Catelyn Stark's voice shook. "Then what do we do?" she asked. Robb looked at his mother. The king and the sun lived in his eyes at once. "We prepare," he said. "We keep eyes on the south. We build a way to reach her if an opening comes." His jaw tightened. "And we win here first, so when I go for her, I go with a north that can't be bought or starved into surrender."
Catelyn svalou da sob.
"I hate that," she whispered. "So do I," Robb said softly. "But hating it won't change it." Daisy Mormont stepped closer. "White Harbor can watch the sea lanes," she said. "Smugglers, sailors, men who hear gossip. If Sansa Stark is moved, if they send her north as leverage, we'll know." Robb nodded once. "Then make it so," he said. Grey Wind rose and pressed his head against Robb's leg, as if sensing the weight the letter had put there. Robb's hand rested on the direwolf's skull for a brief moment. An anchor. In Winterfell's great hall, under repaired beams and smoky torches, Robb Stark made himself fold the letter away and not break. Because kings did not get to choose which pain came first. Only which pain they could survive long enough to answer. White Harbor had always had two hearts. One that beat in daylight with honest trade, and one that beat at night with quieter bargains. Wyman Manderley sat in a dockside warehouse where fish barrels were stacked high and the air smelled of salt and rot. His fine cloak looked out of place among tar and rope, but his eyes did not. His eyes belonged to men who understood that money was only one language, and sometimes it wasn't the most important one. A hooded smuggler stood across from him, face half hidden, hands rough. He unrolled a map of shipping routes on the table, lines like veins between ports, between White Harbor and Gulltown, between Gulltown and King's Landing. "I can get messages in," the smuggler said softly. "Not to the Red Keep, too watched, but into the city, into the taverns where guards drink, into the kitchens where servants gossip." Wendell Manderley stood to the side, jaw tight. "And out?" he asked. The smuggler's mouth twisted. "Out is harder," he admitted. "Getting something out of a locked fist is harder than getting something into it." Wyman Manderley's smile was gentle and dangerous. "Hard isn't impossible," he said. The smuggler hesitated, then reached into his cloak and produced a small note. Tight ink, hurried. A name on it that made Wendell's breath catch. But it's from a washerwoman who cleans cloth for a guard who drinks at the hook and ladder. She says the girl is watched more closely now, taken to the September more often, made to right. Wyman Manderley's eyes narrowed. So the lions tighten the leash, he murmured. The smuggler nodded, nervous. They fear her brother, he whispered. They fear what Winterfell means again. Wyman Manderley set a pouch of gold on the table. It made a dull, heavy sound. You will watch, he said. You will pay your washerwomen and your dock rats and your wine cellars. If the girl is moved, if she leaves the Red Keep, if she's put on a ship, if she's sent north, then I want to know before the first wave hits the quay. The smuggler's eyes flicked to the gold, then away. And if I fail? He asked. Wyman Manderley's smile did not change, but the air felt colder. Then winter will find you, Wyman Manderley said softly, and winter is less forgiving than I am. Wendell Manderley swallowed hard. He had always known his father could be ruthless. Seeing it aimed at something noble, saving a Stark girl, made it feel stranger, like a blade used for surgery instead of murder. The smuggler nodded quickly. I'll watch, he promised. Wyman Manderley leaned forward, voice low. And if you find a way to get a message to her, he said, you tell her this, the North has not forgotten. Wolves and mermen remember. The smuggler hesitated, then nodded again. When he left, slipping into the dockside fog, Wyman Manderley picked up the note with Sansa Stark's name and held it a moment longer than he needed to. Eddard Stark would have died for his daughter, Wyman Manderley murmured. Wendell Manderley's voice was quiet. And will we? Wyman's eyes glittered. If we must, he said. But we'll try to be clever first. Outside, the harbor creaked under winter's grip, and the sea waited, patient and cold, for whatever desperate plan would try to slip a girl through a lion's teeth. The cave near Widow's Watch smelled like stolen survival. It was hidden behind a ridge of rock and pine, its mouth disguised by boulders and winter's habit of covering sins in white. But wolves and mermen had learned to read the coast again, and ironborn secrets were only secrets until someone cared enough to dig. Glover men arrived first, moving through trees with torches held low and shields raised against the wind. Manderley soldiers followed, boots crunching softly, breath steaming. A captain whispered orders, and men fanned out like fingers closing around a throat. Inside the cave, barrels were stacked in rows, grain, salted fish, dried apples, even cloth and boots stolen from villages that had been left to starve. The sight made one of the Northmen swear under his breath, fury sharpening his voice. Then an iron-born reaver stumbled out of the shadows with an axe in hand, eyes widening in shock. Thieves! He roared, as if calling the North a thief while standing in a cave full of stolen food made sense. A spear punched through his chest before the axe could swing. The reaver's roar became a grunt. He fell, blood steaming on stone. More ironborn came. They poured out from side tunnels, snarling, swinging axes that bit into shields with dull thuds. The fight became tight and brutal, torchlight flickering wildly as men shoved and stabbed and slipped on wet stone. A reaver swung at a Glover man's head. The Glover ducked and drove his dagger into the reaver's thigh. The reaver screamed, stumbled, and was finished by a Manderley spear through the throat. Outside the cave mouth, snow fell thicker. Through the Wight, a longship's silhouette lurked off the shore, oars dipping cautiously, as if the iron-born captain couldn't decide whether to flee or fight for the storehouse. A Manderley archer loosed a fire arrow. The shaft hissed through snow and struck the longship's sail, the cloth catching with hungry flame. The longship's men shouted in panic, scrambling to cut lines, to push away from shore. The sea did not care. The fire did. Inside the cave, the last reaver dropped his axe and raised his hands, chest heaving. Mercy, he rasped, and the words sounded foreign in his mouth. A Glover man spat. You didn't give mercy to children, he snarled. The Manderley captain raised a hand. Bind him, he ordered. He talks. The reaver's eyes widened in fear, because talk meant living long enough to be questioned. They dragged barrels out of the cave, some to be hauled inland to feed villages, some to be left as bait for other raiders who might come sniffing. They set the cave's inner stores on fire only after they'd taken what they could. Flame licking greedily at stolen wood and cloth, smoke punching out into the snow-dark sky like a signal. When they left, the cave behind them burned, and the coast smelled of smoke and salt and something new. Ironborn panic. A raven launched inland with ink that mattered more than blood. Stores found. Raid route broken. Ironborn captured alive. And somewhere on the sea, an Ironborn captain watched his burning sail and understood, with dawning dread, that winter had gained hunters. Theon Greyjoy wrote like a man carving words into his own skin. His hands shook so hard the quill scratched uselessly at first, ink blotting like bruises on parchment. Daisy Mormont held his wrist with a firm grip. Not kind, not cruel, simply steadying, as if refusing to let him hide behind trembling. Robb Stark stood behind him in the solar's shadow, watching. Catelyn Stark stood near the window slit, rigid as stone, her face turned slightly away as if she could not bear to watch Theon's hand form letters in Winterfell's air. Grey Wind sat by the hearth, eyes fixed on Theon with the calm of a predator that remembered. "Write it," Robb said quietly. Theon swallowed. "She'll kill me," he rasped. "She's your sister," Robb Stark replied. "If you have any part of you left that still remembers what that means, use it." Theon's mouth twisted. "Asha Greyjoy," he whispered, tasting the name like a prayer and a wound. "Write to Asha Greyjoy," Robb said. "Tell her Ramsay Snow is dead. Tell her her raiders are being hunted. Tell her we have captains who will talk. And tell her this." Robb's voice went colder. "The North will offer terms for any Ironborn who leaves our coast and returns what they stole. Not pardon. Not friendship. Terms." Catelyn Stark turned sharply. "Terms?" she hissed, and the word carried fury. "After what they did." Robb Stark's gaze flicked to her. "After what they did," he agreed softly. "But if we can stop raids without bleeding more northern boys, we do it. Mercy is not for them. It's for us." Catelyn's jaw clenched, but she did not argue again. Winter had already taken too much to waste lives on pride. Theon began to write, each line slow and painful. He wrote to Asha Greyjoy in words that tried to sound like he still had a spine. "Sister, the North is not broken. Winterfell is Stark again. Ramsay Snow is dead. Your men will die on these coasts if they stay. Leave, or come and bleed." His hand shook harder when he wrote the last lines, the ones Robb demanded. "If you come for me, come with peace. If you come with axes, I will be the first thing wolves feed on." Theon's breath came out in a ragged sound. He set the quill down as if it weighed 100 pounds. Daisy Mormont took the parchment and held it to the flame where wax melted. Robb pressed the direwolf seal into it, the imprint deep, deliberate. Theon flinched at the sight of the direwolf on wax, as if it were a brand. Robb Stark leaned closer to him, voice low. "If she answers," Robb said, "and she tries to play games, if she tries to bait me the way Ramsay Snow did, tell me, you've been bait long enough to recognize a hook." Theon's throat worked. He whispered, and the agreement sounded like surrender. Grey Wind stood then, padding closer, nose dipping toward the sealed letter. The direwolf sniffed once, then lifted his head, ears pricked, as if listening for a distant response carried by sea wind. Robb Stark watched the wolf, then Theon, then the candle flame bending in draft. "Send it," Robb said, and somewhere beyond Winterfell's walls, beyond snow-choked forests and cold coasts, a raven launched southwest toward salt and iron and a woman who called herself Greyjoy. Riverrun held with clenched teeth and bleeding hands. Brynden Tully stood on the battlements with frost on his beard and anger in his bones. Across the river, Lannister campfires dotted the fields like red eyes. Siege frames rose slowly, with skeletons being built with patient cruelty. The sound of hammers traveled over water, steady as a heartbeat, reminding everyone inside the castle that time was being weaponized. Edmure Tully stood beside Brynden in armor that looked too heavy for him and yet, somehow, suited him now. He had learned to carry weight. War did that to men who survived long enough. They're testing us, Edmure said quietly, eyes on the enemy camp. Not striking, just pressing. They'll strike when it hurts most, Brynden Tully replied. That's how Tywin Lannister thinks. Pain is his language. A messenger climbed the stairs, breath ragged, face red with cold. He thrust out a parchment sealed with direwolf wax. Brynden took it and broke it open with fingers that did not tremble. He read, and for a heartbeat something like grim satisfaction crossed his face. Winterfell is reclaimed, Brynden Tully said. Edmure's breath left him. Robb, he whispered, and the name sounded like hope he had been afraid to say. Bryndon's gaze stayed on the parchment. Ramsay Snow dead, he added. Hostages freed. He snorted softly. That bastard was a knife. Robb Stark just broke it. Edmure's eyes shone. Then the North holds, he said. Aye, Brynden said. And that means Tywin Lannister will press harder here. He'll want Riverrun as proof that the Riverlands can still be strangled even if the North stands. Edmure's jaw tightened. Then we hold, he said, surprising himself with how certain the words sounded. Brynden Tully looked at him, really looked, and nodded once. Aye, he agreed. We hold. Below the battlements, men moved along Riverrun's walls, checking arrows, boiling water, stones ready to drop. Inside the castle, women rationed bread, children were kept away from windows, and the air smelled of damp and worry. Across the river, a Lannister banner flapped sluggishly in the cold. A rider moved through the enemy camp, cloak snapping. Brynden watched and knew another proclamation would come soon. Another offer of pardon, another threat wrapped in polite words. He folded Robb's letter and tucked it inside his cloak, close to his chest, as if keeping it there could keep the castle upright. Send word back, Brynden ordered. Tell Robb Stark we still breathe. Tell him Tywin Lannister is building. Tell him if he can spare men. Edmure's voice cut in rough. Don't ask him for men, he said. He's fighting the Ironborn and the Wall and the North itself. He can't hold all of us. Brynden's mouth tightened. Then we hold ourselves, he said, and there was pride in it, stubborn river pride. We hold until his wolves can bite south again. Edmure nodded, swallowing fear. On the far bank, hammers kept pounding. The siege frames rose higher. The river ran dark beneath winter sky, and Riverrun held, waiting for the next verse of a war that refused to end cleanly. Night in Winterfell felt less like rest and more like a pause between heartbeats. Robb Stark stood by a brazier in the great hall, firelight painting his face in hard orange. Maps covered the table, north to the Wall, south to Riverrun, west to the coast. 3 directions, 3 wars, 1 king. Catelyn Stark stood close, silent, her eyes on the wall map as if staring hard enough could keep it standing. Daisy Mormont leaned over the coast markings, finger-tracing coves now inked with new knowledge. Galbart Glover's face was drawn with exhaustion, but his eyes were steady. Barbary Dustin watched them all with that cold attention of a woman who trusted nothing except what she could see bleed. A man in black, Maege Mormont's emissary, stood near the doors, cloak dusted with snow. Castle Black says the dead came to the gate, he reported, voice hoarse. They burned them, but there were many. Silence tightened. Then a raven landed on the window ledge with a hard flap of wings. Black wax. Night's watch again. Robb took the message and read. His face went still. They're massing, Robb Stark said quietly. Not charging yet. Just gathering. Catelyn's breath caught. How long? She whispered. Robb's eyes stayed on the ink. They don't know, he said. And that's worse. Not knowing means every night could be the night. Daisy Mormont's voice was low. Wyman Manderly's ships are hitting their stores, she said. Galbart Glover's men are cutting routes. We're tightening the north. She looked up at Robb. But if the wall breaks... If the wall breaks, Robb finished softly. There's no north left to tighten. Barbary Dustin's mouth twisted. Then you go, she said, not a question. Robb Stark stared at the map. He could see the lines as roads, as miles of snow and dark trees. He could see Castle Black's yard with torches and fear. He could see Riverrun's campfires across the river. He could see Sansa's hands shaking over a quill. He exhaled slowly. "I don't leave Winterfell empty," he said. "Not again." Daisy Mormont nodded once. "You won't," she said. "I'll hold it." Robb's gaze met hers. Gratitude, trust, the weight of handing your hearth to another. "You hold it," he agreed. He turned to Galbart Glover. "You keep pressure on the coast and roads," he said. "No raids, no hunger, no room for lies." Galbart nodded. "Aye." He looked to Barbary Dustin. "And you?" Robb said. And the room seemed to tighten around the words because everyone knew hatred still lived in her. "You keep your riders watching the southern approaches. If a lion's emissary comes with coin, I want his name before his horse is tied." Barbary Dustin's eyes glittered. "Gladly," she said. Robb Stark looked at his mother. Catelyn's eyes were bright, frightened, proud, exhausted. She did not beg him not to go. She knew better than to beg a king out of a necessary war. She only asked with her gaze that he return. "I go to the wall," Robb Stark said at last. The words fell into the hall like a stone into deep water. "Not alone. I go with men, with food, with fire, and with the North's banner." Gray wind rose at his feet, pressing close, warm fur against cold mail. The direwolf's eyes lifted toward the north as if he already heard something beyond storms. Robb Stark rested his hand on the wolf's head. "If the dead want our throat," Robb murmured, voice too low for anyone but Gray Wind and perhaps the old stones to hear, "they'll find wolves waiting." The brazier crackled. The raven ruffled its feathers. Outside, snow fell steadily, indifferent. Inside, a king chose which fire to step into first, knowing the others would still burn when he turned back. Winterfell did not like watching its king leave again. The gatehouse groaned as the doors opened, iron hinges protesting in cold. Snow blew in through the gap like an animal forcing its way inside, scattering across the yard where men had been working since dawn. Hammers paused, heads lifted. Eyes followed Robb Stark as if the sight of him riding out might be the last proof they had that Winterfell was truly theirs and not a dream that would break with the next gust. Robb did not look back until he reached the threshold. He sat his horse in the archway, breath steaming, cloak heavy with frost, and for a heartbeat he listened, not to the wind, but to the castle's sound. The scrape of shovels, the creak of wagons, the murmur of men learning to live without screaming. Winterfell was rebuilding itself the way a wounded man rebuilt breathing, slow, painful, necessary. Daisy Mormont waited above on the wall walk, spear planted, her silhouette sharp against the gray sky. She did not wave. She did not smile. She gave him the only farewell that mattered. "I hold it," she called down, voice carrying through wind. Robb nodded once, the motion small but absolute. "Hold it," he answered, and the words were not a request. They were a vow he was placing in her hands because his own were already full. Catelyn Stark rode at his side, hood up, cheeks raw from cold. She had not asked permission this time. She had simply saddled her horse and appeared, her grief turned into stubborn steel. "You shouldn't," Robb had said the night before, voice low. "I won't watch another war from a window," she had replied, and there had been nothing left to argue with in that. Barbary Dustin stood near the yard's edge with her riders, cloak pulled tight, her eyes tracking Robb with that expression that always looked like a wound deciding whether to bleed. When Robb's gaze found her, she lifted her chin slightly. "If the wall falls," Barbary Dustin said, voice flat, "this castle won't matter." Robb's mouth tightened. "Then it won't fall," he said. Barbary's eyes glittered. "Don't make promises Winter can hear," she murmured. "Winter hears everything," Catelyn Stark snapped, and Barbary Dustin's mouth twitched as if amused that grief could still find heat. Gray wind trotted ahead through the gate, paws crunching on packed snow, ears forward. The dire wolf did not look back. Wolves did not look back when the scent ahead grew stronger. The escort formed behind them, Galbart Glover's men, Maege Mormont's remaining riders, a handful of Winterfell's hard-edged veterans. Not an army. Robb could not strip Winterfell bare. Not again. But enough men to carry fire, enough men to hold a line, enough men to make the Night's Watch feel the North's breath on their backs. Robb's hand tightened on his reins. He looked once more at the direwolf banner snapping above the gatehouse, black against gray. "Sansa Stark will hear I went," Catelyn whispered beside him, and the words were half fear, half hope. Robb stared forward. "Sansa Stark will hear I held," he said quietly. "And that's the only way I get her back without losing everything else." Catelyn did not answer. She only rode closer, as if proximity could keep him from vanishing into another cold place that might swallow him. The column moved. Hooves broke snow crust. The gatehouse receded behind them, and Winterfell's walls became a darker line against the white land, stubborn and waiting. Robb Stark rode north, toward a wall of ice and a war that did not care about crowns. Behind him, Winterfell kept breathing. The gift looked like a place the world had forgotten to finish. Fences sagged under snow. Crofter huts crouched in drifts like animals trying to hide. Fields were flat white plains with no tracks except the ones they made, and even those were swallowed quickly by falling flakes, as if the land did not want evidence of anyone passing through. The Night's Watch scout who guided them spoke little. His black cloak was patched, his face wind-burned, his eyes always moving. He led them away from the straight King's Road when he could, steering them through treelines and shallow dips where wind and snow might hide them from eyes that watched. Robb didn't know if those eyes belonged to wildlings or worse. He didn't ask. He didn't need to. The scout's silence was answer enough. They passed a crofter's hut with its door hanging open, the interior black. A pot sat on the hearth, frozen to the stone, as if someone had left in the middle of cooking and never returned. Catelyn Stark's breath hitched at the sight. She imagined a mother grabbing a child, running into snow, looking back once, just once, before the world became nothing but cold and fear. A small figure moved behind the hut's broken fence. A child, thin as a reed, face smudged with soot, eyes wide. When the child saw horses and men, he froze like prey. Catelyn slid down from her saddle before Robb could stop her. Snow swallowed her boots. She approached slowly, hands open. "Easy," she murmured. "We won't hurt you." The child trembled, then took one step, then another, drawn by the promise of warmth even when he didn't trust it. His lips were blue. His hands were raw. "Where's your family?" Catelyn asked softly. The child's voice came out like a broken thing. "Gone," he whispered. They went to the wall. They said the watch would feed us. They said," he swallowed hard, "they said dead men were walking." Robb Stark felt the words settle on his shoulders like fresh snow. Light until it accumulated, then crushing. Catelyn pulled the child close and wrapped him in a spare cloak one of Galbart Glover's men offered without being asked. The child clutched it like treasure. "Come with us," Robb said, voice steady. "You'll reach the wall." The child stared at him, confused, then recognized the direwolf pin on Robb's cloak and made a small sound that might have been relief. They rode on. Barbary Dustin's riders shadowed them at a distance, never joining, never leaving. When Robb glanced back, he could see their dark shapes on a ridge like crows watching a carcass. Barbary did not trust roads. She trusted sightlines and exits. Gray wind stopped near a drift and sniffed hard, hackles rising. The direwolf's body went rigid, tail low. Robb reined in at once. Men's hands moved to weapons, breath held. The drift shifted as if something underneath it exhaled. A corpse lay half buried in the snow, face pale, mouth open. A watch cloak. A ranger, perhaps, sent out and not brought back. His skin was mottled with frostbite, eyes glazed. "Don't touch him," the watch scout warned sharply. But even as he spoke, the corpse's fingers twitched. Catelyn Stark's breath caught. The child whimpered and pressed into her side. The corpse's eyes snapped open blue. A sound tore from its throat, Not speech, not scream, something between. It lurched upward, snow sliding off it in clumps. Robb Stark moved without thinking. He drew his sword and stepped forward, but the Watch Scout was faster with what mattered. He shoved a torch into the corpse's chest, flame catching on stiff cloth. The Wight shrieked then, high, terrible, and flailed, clawing at the air as if trying to tear the fire away. Gray wind lunged, teeth snapping for throat. His jaws clamped onto the Wight's shoulder and ripped it sideways, buying a heartbeat. Robb slammed his sword into the thing's spine, pinning it to the ground. Still moved, still clawed. Fire! Galbart Glover shouted, and another torch came down, pressed to the Wight's face until flame took hair and skin. The shriek died into crackling. The body spasmed, then went still, smoke rising into the gray air. Silence returned, heavier than before. Catelyn Stark stared at the blackened remains and felt her stomach turn. "It's real," she whispered. Robb Stark wiped his blade on snow that instantly melted red. "Yes," he said, "and it's closer than any story ever admitted." The Watch Scout looked at him, eyes haunted. "Now you understand," he said. Robb Stark's gaze lifted north. "I understood," he replied softly. "Now my men will." They rode on, leaving burned bones behind, and the snow fell over the blackened patch as if trying to hide the truth again. Castle Black took them in like a man swallowing a bitter mouthful because he had no choice. The gate opened wide enough for horses and men, then closed again with a boom that reverberated through the yard. Snow whirled in the enclosed space, trapped by the wall's shadow, and torches hissed as flakes struck flame. The air smelled of smoke and wet wool and fear that had been breathed too many nights in a row. Jon Snow waited near the gate with Maege Mormont and Galbart Glover at his side, his black cloak snapping, his face rimed with ice. When Robb Stark dismounted, Jon stepped forward and looked at him for a long moment, as if confirming the king was not a rumor. "Robb Stark," Jon Snow said, and his voice held the weight of old friendship and something heavier now, responsibility that had aged him. "You came." Robb's mouth tightened. "You asked," he said. Catelyn Stark slid down from her saddle, eyes darting over Castle Black's yard. The men in black, the pyre ash, the way every brother watched the tree lean beyond the wall even though walls blocked sight. Jon's gaze flicked to her, and something like respect tightened his face. "Lady Catelyn Stark," Jon Snow said, careful, because words here mattered in ways they never had in Winterfell's halls. Catelyn nodded once, stiff. She did not know what she felt about Jon Snow in this moment. Ned's secret made flesh, yes, but also a man holding the North's throat shut with bare hands. Maege Mormont's grin was quick and fierce. "Told you he'd come," she said to Jon Snow. Galbart Glover's eyes remained hard. "We brought more fire," he said. "More food, more men." Jon Snow nodded, but his gaze slid past them to the wall's gate as if expecting it to shudder again at any moment. "We'll take it," he said, "and we'll use it tonight." Alliser Thorne stood off to the side, his expression like a sour wound. He did not bow. He did not greet. He stared at Robb Stark as if the sight of a king within Castle Black's yard was an insult to every oath he'd ever recited. "This is not a king's hall," Alliser Thorne said sharply. "This is the Night's Watch. We do not kneel. We do not." Robb Stark's gaze fixed on him, calm and cold. "I didn't ask you to kneel," Robb said. "I came to keep you breathing." Alliser Thorne's lip curled. "Or to make yourself look noble while the realm calls you cursed." A ripple moved through the watchmen. Unease, anger, agreement in some eyes, discomfort in others. The faith's poison had reached even here, carried by ravens and whispers and the human need to make horror fit into familiar categories. Jon Snow stepped between them, posture rigid. "Enough," he said. "Castle Black doesn't have time for Southern scrolls. The dead don't care what the faith thinks." Alliser Thorne's jaw clenched, but he fell silent, eyes burning. From a doorway near the rookery, Maester Aemon watched, his blind gaze turned toward the sound of voices. His face looked carved by age, but his posture was steady. "A king at the wall," he murmured softly, and the words carried an old sadness. "The world turns strange when winter truly comes." Robb Stark turned toward the blind maester, surprise flickering. "Maester Aemon," Robb said, because he knew the name from Winterfell's letters and from Ned Stark's rare stories. "We brought food." Maester Aemon's mouth curved faintly. "Food is love in winter," he replied. Grey Wind stood between Robb and Jon, ears forward, sniffing. The direwolf's gaze held Jon Snow for a heartbeat, then shifted away, satisfied. Wolves judged quickly. Jon Snow exhaled slowly, as if letting himself feel relief for a single breath. Then he spoke again, voice low. "We saw them last night," he said. "Wights, close to the gate, and—" He hesitated, then continued, quieter, blue eyes farther out, watching. Robb Stark's grip tightened on his sword hilt. "White Walkers," he said. Some men flinched at the name. Some pretended they hadn't heard it. Fear loved denial. Jon Snow nodded once. "Yes."
Catelyn Stark, throat tightened.
"Then we don't waste time," she said, voice harsh with urgency. Jon Snow met her gaze, and something like grim agreement passed between them. "We don't," he said. He turned to Robb Stark. "If you're here," Jon said, "then you fight by my command while you're inside these walls. That's the Watch's way." Robb Stark did not bristle. "Command," he said simply. "Tell me where you need me." Jon Snow's shoulders eased a fraction. "On the wall," he said, "at dusk." And Castle Black swallowed them deeper into its cold routines, because night was coming, and beyond the gate, something waited without breathing. The wall was a world made of ice and noise. Wind screamed across its top, and the ice beneath boots felt alive. Slick, shifting, groaning faintly as the cold contracted and expanded. Torches burned along the parapet. Their flames bent low, and barrels of pitch were lined up like mute threats. Men moved carefully, shoulders hunched, hands raw, hauling scorpion bolts and coiling ropes, every motion made harder by wind that tried to steal breath. Jon Snow walked the length of the wall with Robb Stark beside him, their cloaks snapping. Maege Mormont followed, her face set. Galbart Glover scanned the dark forest beyond with narrowed eyes. Bowen Marsh hovered near the stairwell, his expression pinched, worry carved into his brow like frost. Alliser Thorne stalked close, listening to Jon's orders with tight-lipped compliance that felt more dangerous than open defiance. His eyes flicked to Robb often, like a man looking for any excuse to call the king a problem. "They come in waves," Jon Snow said, voice raised to fight the wind. "Not like men, not like wildlings. They don't break when you kill the first 10. They don't feel fear. Then we teach them fire," Maege Mormont growled. Jon nodded. "Fire," he agreed, "and spears, and staying in line even when you see something that makes your guts want to run." Robb Stark looked down over the wall's edge at the darkness beyond. The forest was a mass of black needles. Snow moved through it like pale smoke. Somewhere out there, something watched without warmth. "How close do they come?" Robb asked. Jon's jaw tightened. "Close enough to hear them," he said. "Scraping, thuds, like they're learning where our wood is weakest." He glanced at the scorpion frames. "We've killed many. Still more come." Bowen Marsh cleared his throat, voice strained. "If the gate breaks, then we burn the tunnel." Jon Snow cut in, and there was no softness in the words. "We burn it and we lose it and we hold the courtyard instead. Better a burned gate than a dead wall." Bowen Marsh flinched as if struck by the brutality of the choice, but he did not argue. Even stewards understood arithmetic when corpses walked. Alliser Thorne's gaze slid to Grey Wind, who paced near the black banner, nails clicking on ice. The direwolf's presence made some brothers uneasy. Animals were unpredictable, and unpredictability was fear's cousin. "A wolf on the wall," Alliser Thorne muttered. "If it slips." "It won't," Robb Stark said quietly, and the quiet confidence in it made Alliser Thorne's mouth tighten. Grey Wind stopped and stared into the darkness beyond the wall, ears forward, body rigid. A low rumble built in his chest, warning without sound. Jon Snow noticed immediately. He lifted his torch higher. "Movement," he said, and it wasn't a question. Men gathered at the parapet, peering out, eyes watering from wind. At first there was nothing, just black forest and swirling snow. Then shapes appeared. Not men in cloaks, not wildlings running. Shapes that moved too steadily, too silently. Pale faces, blue eyes glinting faintly in torchlight. A Night's Watch brother whispered a prayer, voice cracking. Jon Snow's voice cut through. "Ready," he ordered. "Pitch at the front. Arrows first. Spears when they reach the gate." Robb Stark lifted ice. He had brought the great Valyrian blade north despite its weight. And here, under the walls cold, it looked like a relic from a time when men believed steel could solve everything. The sword's dark ripples caught torchlight like trapped fire. Maege Mormont eyed it and grinned. "That'll do," she said. Robb Stark did not answer. He watched the blue-eyed shapes move nearer, and he felt the twins' lesson again. A trap was not always a hall. Sometimes it was the world itself, waiting for you to believe you were safe behind old stone and older vows. Night settled heavier. The dead approached, and on the wall's ice, living men tightened their grips, and pretended courage was something you could choose even when fear crawled under your skin like cold. The gate tunnel became a throat full of teeth. They heard the first impact like a drumbeat, with shuddering, iron bands groaning. Then another, then a relentless series that made the whole tunnel vibrate. Men braced spears, their points aimed at the crack where the gate might splinter. Torches flared as hands tightened. The air smelled of pitch, smoke, sweat. Jon Snow stood near the front with his sword drawn, voice hard. "Hold!" he shouted. "Do not open." A younger brother's face went white. "They'll break it. Then we burn them at the mouth," Jon snapped. The gate shuddered again. A plank split with a sharp crack. Fingers stiff, pale, pushed through, clawing. "Now!" Maege Mormont roared. A spear with cloth wrapped at its tip was thrust forward, flame snapping. It jabbed into the fingers, and the Wight shrieked, yanking back. Smoke poured through the crack. Men shoved pitch-soaked rags into gaps and lit them, turning the gate itself into a burning barrier. Then the gate burst inward anyway. Not fully, iron bands held, but enough for bodies to push through the jagged opening, spilling into the tunnel like a tide of frozen hunger. Blue eyes flashed, dead mouths opened. Robb Stark stepped into the front line with ice in both hands, and the Valyrian blade looked suddenly right, as if it had always belonged in a place where ordinary steel felt too small. He swung once, hard, and took a Wight's head clean off. The head hit the ground and kept biting, jaws snapping, until Maege Mormont slammed her burning spear into it and the skull caught, crackling. Wights poured in behind. Spears punched into chests and bellies that did not bleed. Men shouted and cursed and tried not to vomit as dead hands grabbed at cloaks and faces. Fire became everything. Torches jammed into ribs, pitch thrown, flames licking up sleeves and hair. Gray wind lunged into the chaos, teeth clamping onto a Wight's arm. He tore it off with a brutal shake. The arm still writhed, fingers clawing at nothing. Gray wind growled, confused fury rumbling, then snapped again, biting at a throat that did not feel like prey. Robb grabbed a torch and slammed it into the Wight's chest beside Grey Wind's jaws, forcing Flame to take. Alliser Thorne fought like a man who had finally found an enemy he could hate without politics. He swung his sword in one hand and held a torch in the other, driving Flame into faces, snarling. "Die!" he roared, as if words could command corpses. Galbart Glover's archers fired from behind, flaming arrows streaking into the mass where Wights clustered, setting bodies alight. The tunnel filled with smoke so thick eyes watered and throats burned. Coughing became constant. Catelyn Stark dragged wounded men back toward the courtyard, her hands shaking as she hauled bodies heavier than her grief. A brother with a torn throat gurgled as she pulled him, blood steaming on snow carried in on boots. She pressed a cloth to his neck with numb fingers, whispering, "Stay," as if the word could hold life in place. Jon Snow drove his sword through a Wight's face and kicked it back into the press. "Fire!" he shouted again. "Keep the fire!" A Wight climbed over burning bodies, its flesh blackening without slowing. It lunged at Robb Stark, fingers reaching for Robb's throat. Robb twisted, slammed the flat of ice into its skull, staggering it, then chopped down through its collarbone. The Wight fell, limbs still twitching, and Maege's torch finished it. The gate creaked behind the Wights as men shoved it closed again, forcing the dead back into a narrower opening where fire could eat them more efficiently. Wight screamed, a chorus of crackling agony that sounded like winter itself breaking. After minutes that felt like years, the pressure eased. The dead outside the gate did not retreat like living men. They simply burned until the ones behind could no longer push through without climbing over fire. Smoke thinned enough to breathe. Bodies, living and dead, littered the tunnel. Torches guttered. Men leaned on spears, shaking. Some cried without sound. Jon Snow stood amid the aftermath, chest heaving, soot on his face. He looked at Robb Stark once, eyes hard and grateful. "They were testing," he said hoarsely. Robb Stark wiped ice on a scorched cloak, his hands steady because he refused to let them shake. "Then they learned," he replied. Outside the gate, something scraped once against wood, slow, deliberate, then stopped, like a hand withdrawing after touching a wound. The tunnel fell silent except for the crackle of dying flame. And every man there understood. This had not been the attack. It had been the message. They went beyond the wall because waiting made fear rot into madness. Jon Snow chose men who could move quietly and think even when cold turned thoughts sluggish. Rangers first, then Maege Mormont's toughest, then Robb Stark with ice over his shoulder and gray wind ghosting ahead. Catelyn Stark stayed behind the gate, jaw clenched, because there were lines even she could not cross without snapping. She watched her son disappear into the Wight and felt something in her chest tear like cloth. Beyond the wall, the forest felt wrong. Trees stood close, their trunks black against snow that glowed faintly under moonlight. The air was so cold it seemed to sting lungs from the inside. Frost hung on branches like crystal teeth. Sound carried strangely, too far, then not at all, swallowed by drifts and silence. Gray wind moved ahead with his head low, hackles raised, growl barely audible. The dire wolf did not like this place. It smelled like death that had been waiting a long time. Jon Snow lifted a hand, halting them. Torches were held low, flames subdued beneath cloth so they wouldn't broadcast their presence. Men's breaths came out slow, controlled. Then they saw them. Wights stood between trees, motionless, arranged like men waiting for inspection. Their faces were pale. Their eyes were blue. They did not sway. They did not blink. They simply stood, as if listening to something far beyond human hearing. Maege Mormont muttered, "Bastards," and the words sounded small here. Robb Stark's grip tightened on ice. "They're not attacking," he whispered. "No," Jon Snow replied, voice low. "They're showing us they can." A Wight turned its head slowly toward them. The movement was too smooth, too deliberate, like a puppet pulled by an unseen hand. "Back," Jon murmured, but he didn't retreat yet. He wanted to understand. He needed a clearer enemy than shadows. The Wights began to move. Not charging, not rushing. Walking. Slow, steady. A line advancing through snow with no sound of breath. Their hands hung loose at their sides. Their mouths were open, silent. A coldness pressed against the forest, subtle at first, then heavier, like the air itself had been replaced by something else. Frost formed in the edges of torchlight, tiny crystals swirling. Robb Stark felt it in his bones. Gray wind stopped, growl deepening into something close to fear. "Something's here," Maege Mormont whispered. Jon Snow's eyes narrowed, staring past the Wights into deeper darkness. "Yes," he said. A shape moved between trees, tall, pale, almost indistinguishable until moonlight caught it and turned it into a glimmer of ice. Blue eyes, brighter than the Wights, watched from the shadows. The air around it seemed colder, as if it carried winter in its veins. A White Walker. Men's throats tightened. One ranger muttered a prayer. Jon Snow's voice was calm, but it was the calm of a man bracing for impact. "Fire ready," he whispered. "No panique." The White Walker did not rush, simply stood and watched, and the watching felt like mockery. Robb Stark stepped forward a half-pace, ice in hand, and the White Walker's head tilted slightly, as if curious. Then the Wights surged. Not fast, not screaming, but suddenly close. Hands reaching, nails scraping. Torches thrust forward, flame catching on dry cloth. Wights shrieked and fell, but more came, pushed from behind by silent will. Robb Stark swung ice into a Wight's shoulder, cleaving deep. The limb hung useless, but the Wight still clawed. Fire had to finish it. Always fire. Jon Snow cut a Wight down and kicked it back into flame. Maege Mormont's axe split skulls that did not bleed. Rangers held line, backs pressed close, torches forming a trembling ring of light. Through the chaos, the White Walker began to move, stepping toward them with terrifying calm. Robb Stark saw it clearly now. The Wights were not the weapon. They were the extension. The White Walker was the hand. Ice felt heavier in his grip, and yet, for the first time, he felt grateful for every brutal lesson that had kept him alive. Traps, bait, lies. This enemy did not speak. It did not bargain. It only advanced. "Stay together," Jon Snow shouted, voice cracking through fear. "Do not break." The White Walker's blue eyes fixed on Robb Stark, and the world narrowed to frost, fire, and the slow approach of something that had never needed to hurry. The clearing opened like a throat. Trees parted, and sudden space made the cold feel sharper. Moonlight spilled onto snow, turning it into pale glass. The White Walker stepped into the light with the calm of a creature that believed the world belonged to it by age alone. In its hand was a sword made of ice, thin, shimmering, reflecting torchlight in cruel fragments. Frost formed wherever its feet touched. The air tightened, colder than weather. Robb Stark moved forward, ice raised. The Valyrian blade looked dark against the White Walker's pale weapon, ancient steel against winter's cruelty. Jon Snow's shout came behind him as Wights surged again, forcing rangers to hold the ring. "Robb!" Jon warned, but there was no time for caution that lived in words. The White Walker struck first. Its ice sword came down with speed that made it look effortless. Ice met ice, Valyrian steel meeting frozen magic, and the impact rang like a bell cracked in a chapel. Frost exploded outward in glittering shards. Robb's arms jolted. He staggered one step, boots slipping on packed snow. The White Walker tilted its head, almost amused.
Robb Stark's mouth tightened.
He swung ice in a hard diagonal, forcing the White Walker back. The creature parried, its blade sliding along Valyrian ripples with a hiss that sounded like a scream swallowed. The White Walker's second strike was quicker, aimed at Robb's throat. Robb twisted, barely avoiding it, feeling cold brush his skin like a kiss that could kill. He countered with a short, brutal cut toward its ribs. The White Walker moved like water freezing, smooth, precise. It stepped aside, then drove its blade toward Robb's chest. Robb met it with ice steel shuddering. He felt the White Walker's strength through the blade. Unnatural, relentless, not like a man's muscle but like winter itself pressing down. Behind them, the ring of fire fought to hold. Wights crashed into torches, shrieking as flame caught, only to be shoved back with spears. Maege Mormont's axe rose and fell, her breath a furious fog. Jon Snow's sword flashed, cutting and burning, his voice raw with commands. Grey wind lunged at a Wight that tried to crawl under the torch ring, teeth clamping onto its neck. The Wight kept clawing even as grey wind tore, until a ranger drove a torch into it, and the corpse finally collapsed into crackling stillness. Robb Stark's world shrank back to the White Walker. The creature's blade fainted high, then came low, slicing toward Robb's leg. Robb jumped back, felt the ice sword graze his boot, and frost crawled instantly across leather. He kicked free, teeth clenched, then swung ice in a full arc, pouring strength and fury into the blow. The White Walker caught it, and for a heartbeat the two blades locked. Blue eyes stared into Robb's face. In them was no hate, only cold certainty that men were brief things. Robb Stark leaned in, voice low, breath steaming between them. "You don't get my throat," he whispered, and then he shifted his grip, wrenching ice down and to the side, breaking the lock. The White Walker's guard opened for a fraction. Robb struck. Ice drove into the creature's midsection with a sound like glass cracking. The White Walker's eyes widened, and for the first time something like surprise flickered there. Then the creature shattered. Not fell, shattered, splintering into ice shards that burst outward and vanished into snow like broken stars. Its sword disintegrated with it, the cold pressure easing so suddenly men staggered as if a weight had been lifted from their chests. A wave of stillness rippled through the clearing. The Wights froze mid-lunge, mid-grab, then collapsed like puppets with cut strings. Bodies hit snow with dull thuds. Hands went limp. Blue eyes dimmed into dead gray. Jon Snow stared, breath ragged. Maege Mormont lowered her axe slowly, disbelief tightening her face. Robb Stark stood with ice still raised, chest heaving, frost on his lashes, heart hammering like it wanted to break free. "Valyrian steel," Jon Snow breathed, and the words sounded like revelation and fear. Robb Stark looked at the scattered Wights lying still, and understood something that made his stomach twist. Not relief, but urgency. One White Walker had been a hand. If there were many hands, then there were many strings. And if killing the hand cut the strings, then the war had an answer, if they could find enough blades to swing before winter swallowed everything. "Back," Robb Stark said, voice rough. "Back to the wall. Now." The torch ring tightened, men stumbling over suddenly lifeless corpses. Gray wind shook snow from his fur and pressed close to Robb, still growling softly, as if unwilling to believe the danger had truly vanished. They retreated through trees with moonlight at their backs and a new truth burning in their minds. The enemy could be killed, and that meant the enemy could be hunted. They brought ice shards back like proof and curse combined. Castle Black's hall smelled of smoke and sweat and wet wool. Men crowded close to the hearth because the cold had a way of making even pride seek warmth. Jon Snow stood at the front with Robb Stark beside him. Ice leaned against the table, its dark ripples catching firelight. On the table lay a handful of pale fragments that had been gathered from the clearing, shards that melted slowly, leaving wet circles on wood. Maester Aemon sat near the fire, blind eyes turned toward the sound of voices, his hands folded as if in prayer. Bowen Marsh looked at the shards as if they might leap up and bite. Alliser Thorne stared at them with suspicion that had nowhere else to go. "You're telling us," Bowen Marsh said, voice tight, "that a king's sword killed one of them?" Robb Stark's gaze held him. "Valyrian steel killed it," Robb replied. "Ice killed it." Alliser Thorne's lip curled. "Convenient," he spat. "A cursed king arrives and suddenly claims he can kill the demons of children's tales." Maege Mormont's laugh was a bark. "We watched it shatter," she snapped. "If you want to call that convenient, you can eat the shards." Galbart Glover leaned forward, eyes hard. "And when it shattered," he said, "the Wights fell, all of them, like strings cut." Silence rippled through the hall. Even men who hated Robb's crown could not deny the weight of that. Maester Aemon spoke softly, voice old but steady. "Then the others lead," he murmured. "As men suspected, as men feared." His blind face turned slightly toward Jon Snow. "And Valyrian steel is a key." Jon Snow's jaw tightened. "A key we don't have enough of," he said. He looked around the hall. "We have fire, we have spears, we have courage." His voice went colder. "We do not have enough blades that can end what commands them." Bowen Marsh swallowed. "Then we die," he whispered, and the honesty in it was raw. "No," Robb Stark said sharply. The word cracked through the hall like a snapped branch. "Then we find more," Alliser Thorne scoffed. Where? He demanded. You'll send ravens to the Seven and ask them to forge you swords? Jon Snow's gaze cut toward him. Enough, he warned. Robb Stark ignored the jibe and spoke to the room as if speaking to men on a battlefield. Dragonglass, he said. Obsidian. The Watch has found it before. Dragonstone has it in abundance. He looked at Maester Aemon. And the Citadel has old records. Ravens to Old Town. Ravens to Dragonstone. Ravens to every lord with Valyrian steel hanging over a hearth. Maege Mormont's eyes narrowed. And wildlings? She asked, voice blunt. They're still out there. If the dead come in numbers, we'll need bodies to hold lines. Even if the bodies are rude and stink. A murmur of discomfort spread. The Watch hated wildlings. Habit hated change. Bowen Marsh's face pinched. We cannot open the gate to them, he said. They are enemies. They have raided the gift for generations. And the dead have raided the world for longer, Robb Stark replied, voice flat. Alliser Thorne's eyes flashed. You don't command the Watch, he snapped at Robb. You don't decide who comes through our gate. Jon Snow stepped forward, voice hard. He doesn't, Jon said. Ido. The hall quieted at that. Some men looked relieved to have the authority line drawn. Others looked frightened because authority meant responsibility, and responsibility meant choices that would be blamed later. Jon Snow's voice lowered. If we can kill the others, he said, we have a chance. If we can't hold the wall long enough to kill them, nothing else matters. His gaze swept the room. Wildlings can hold spears. Wildlings can carry torches. Wildlings can die in place of my brothers if my brothers refuse to live beside them. Bowen Marsh flinched. Alliser Thorne's jaw tightened. Robb Stark spoke quietly, not as king now, but as a man who had learned what traps looked like. The dead do not care who knelt to what god, he said. They care that you have warm blood. Maester Aemon's voice came again, soft as ash. Wisdom, he murmured. At last. Gray wind shifted by Robb's boots, a low rumble threading the tension, as if the dire wolf found human arguments tiresome when claws were at gates. Jon Snow took a breath. I will meet the wildling leaders, he said. If they want through, they swear to fight. They swear to obey. They swear to burn their dead. His gaze hardened. And if they refuse, they stay outside and the dead take them anyway. Silence held. Then Maege Mormont nodded once. Good, she said. Give them a choice that isn't a lie. Robb Stark looked at the melting shards on the table and felt the urgency in his bones. The enemy was real. The enemy could be killed. And time was the only thing they could not bargain for. The storm made the world small. Snow whipped so hard it stung eyes and turned breath into pain. The gate stood half open under guard, chains creaking, the gap controlled like a wound kept from reopening. Torches flared and guttered in gusts, their smoke flattened by wind. Jon Snow stood at the threshold with his cloak snapping and his face set. Across from him, on the far side of the gate, wildlings waited. Ragged furs, scarred faces, eyes bright with stubborn survival. Tormund Giantsbane stood near the front, broad and red-bearded, snow collecting in his hair. Beside him was Mance Rayder, thinner, quieter, his gaze sharp and measuring, the kind of man who had worn many faces and kept them all intact. So, Tormund Giantsbane rumbled, eyes flicking to the wall's height. The crows finally decide they need more than crow bones to hold their cold cliff. All men are needed, Jon Snow replied. His voice carried no insult, only necessity. The dead come. You've seen them too. Mance Rayder's gaze slid past Jon to Robb Stark standing a step behind. Hood up, Ice's dark hilt visible beneath his cloak. And you brought a king, Mance said softly, or a boy playing at one. Robb Stark did not flinch. I brought fire, he said simply, and I brought a blade that can kill what commands the dead. Tormund Giantsbane's eyes narrowed. A pretty claim, he said. Wildlings die for claims every winter. Jon Snow lifted a hand. Steady. No claims, he said. Terms. He spoke them plainly. Wildlings lay down stolen steel, submit to counting, swear to fight the dead, swear to burn their corpses, swear to keep peace south of the wall. In exchange, food, shelter, passage through. Mance Rayder listened without interrupting. When Jon finished, Mance's mouth curved slightly. "You ask me to kneel," he said. "I ask you to live," Jon Snow replied, and the bluntness in it made even Tormund pause. Mance's gaze shifted to the storm beyond, to the dark woods where shapes moved sometimes at the edge of sight. "The dead don't bargain," Mance said. "They just take." "Yes," Robb Stark said quietly, "and they'll take you first if you stand outside this gate and argue about pride." Alliser Thorne's voice rang down from the wall walk, bitter. "Don't open wider," he called. "They'll gut us in our sleep." Tormund Giantsbane looked up at the sound and grinned, teeth bright. "That one talks like a man who's been gutted before," he shouted back. A few wildlings laughed. A few Watch brothers bristled. The storm swallowed most of the sound anyway. Maege Mormont stood behind Jon, arms crossed, her expression daring anyone to try betrayal. She looked at Tormund the way a bear looked at a wolf. Respect for teeth, no patience for games. Grey Wind stood near Robb's leg, growl low, ears forward toward the woods. The direwolf did not care about politics. He cared about scent and threat, and the threat beyond the gate was thickening. Mance Rayder's eyes flicked to Grey Wind. "Your wolf doesn't like this," Mance observed. "No," Robb Stark said. "Neither do I." Mance took a slow breath. "If I bring my people through," he said, voice controlled, "your watch will call it treason. Your southern lords will call it madness. Your faith will call it sin. Let them," Jon Snow said. "They won't be here when the dead climb." Mance Rayder stared at him, measuring the truth in his eyes. Then he nodded once, small and decisive. "Open," he said, and the word was not command so much as surrender to reality. Jon Snow turned to the gatemen. "Wider," he ordered. Slow, controlled. Chains clanked. The gate opened another span. Wind screamed through, carrying snow and the smell of cold death. Wildlings stepped forward. First a few, then more. Eyes wary, hands tight on spears and torches. Night's Watchmen held their line. Weapons ready, fear visible in stiff shoulders. Robb Stark watched them pass beneath the wall's shadow and felt a strange, bitter hope. Not clean hope, not the kind songs promised. The kind built from necessity and shared terror. Behind them, in the storm, something moved again, too tall, too still. Grey Wind's growl deepened. And the gate kept opening, because if the living were going to survive, they had to stop fighting over names and start fighting what had no name men wanted to speak. The dead came again before dawn, because the dead had no respect for agreements made by living men. They came in greater numbers this time. More shapes in the storm, more blue eyes glinting faintly at the edge of torchlight. But they came to a different gate. Wildlings stood beside Watch brothers now, spears braced, torches held high. Their breath mixed in the cold air, white and frantic. Tormund Giantsbane roared curses in a tongue the Watch barely understood. But the meaning was simple enough.
Stand, stand, stand.
Jon Snow moved along the line like a blade sliding through a sheath, checking grips, barking orders. Robb Stark stood near the center with ice in both hands. Grey Wind at his side. The direwolf's fur rhymed with frost. Maege Mormont's men held the flank, their torches forming a trembling wall of light. Galbart Glover's archers loosed fire-tipped arrows that hissed through snow and struck bodies that did not bleed but did burn. The first Wight hit the line and was met by flame. A wildling shoved a torch into its face and screamed as the corpse shrieked back. A Watch brother speared it through the ribs and held it there until fire took. Another Wight climbed over the burning one, hands clawing, and Robb Stark's blade took its head off in one clean swing. The head rolled in the snow, jaws snapping, until Grey Wind crushed it under paw and a torch finished it. Wights surged and fell. Fire ate. Men slipped on blackened snow and were hauled back by comrades who would have killed each other weeks ago. A wildling grabbed a Watch brother's cloak when the brother stumbled. dragging him upright with a snarl that sounded like insult and mercy combined. In the chaos, Robb Stark felt the cold pressure shift again, the subtle tightening that meant a hand was behind the puppets. He saw it through the storm, a tall, pale shape, glimmering, watching. "White Walker!" someone screamed, voice cracking. Jon Snow's head snapped toward it. "Hold the line," he shouted. "Fire stays forward." Robb Stark moved, not rushing, not raging, moving with the same cold discipline that had kept him alive at the Twins. He pushed through the press of burning bodies toward the edge where the pale shape stood, ice raised. The White Walker stepped forward, ice sword lifting, blue eyes bright with hateful calm. Their blades met, and frost burst outward like shattered glass. Robb's arms jolted. He forced himself steady, teeth clenched, feet digging into blackened snow. Behind him, Jon Snow fought to keep the line from buckling. Tormund Giantsbane bellowed and slammed a spear into a Wight's chest, then drove it into flame. Maege Mormont's men held their torches high, faces smeared with soot. The White Walker struck fast, too fast for a man's reflex. Robb parried, felt cold bite along ice's length, felt the creature's strength press. He twisted, shoved, swung. The White Walker's guard opened for a heartbeat, and Robb drove ice into its chest the way he had in the forest. The White Walker shattered. Ice shards exploded into the storm, vanishing as if swallowed by the world. The cold pressure eased like a breath released, and the Wights, dozens at the line, collapsed. They fell mid-lunge, mid-claw, bodies going limp, blue eyes dimming into dead gray. Men staggered as if the ground itself had shifted beneath them. A watch brother dropped to his knees, sobbing. A wildling stared at the lifeless corpses and whispered something that sounded like awe. For a heartbeat, there was only crackling fire and ragged breathing. Then the storm began to lighten, the sky paling from black to bruised gray. Dawn crept in, reluctant. Jon Snow stepped toward Robb Stark, soot on his face, eyes hard and alive. "You did it," he rasped. "We did," Robb Stark corrected, and his voice was rough with exhaustion. He looked at the mixed line, black cloaks, wildling furs, northern spears. "We hold together or we die separate," he said, loud enough for men nearby to hear. Gray wind lifted his head and howled, long and fierce, the sound rolling over burned snow and up the wall's ice like a declaration meant for the whole north. Inside the gate, Catelyn Stark watched, hands clenched, tears freezing on her lashes. She did not know what prayer to speak for this, only that her son still stood. Ravens launched from the rookery as soon as the fighting ceased, black shapes against pale sky, carrying ink that mattered more than any proclamation. The dead walk, the wall bleeds, Valyrian steel kills the others. Fire saves US. Come north or die alone. Robb Stark stood in the dawn light with ice in his hands and soot on his face, and he understood something with brutal clarity. The war with lions had been about crowns. This war was about whether men deserved to live at all. And for the first time, the realm's politics felt small enough to crush under a boot, if only he could make the realm look up in time.